Greetings, guys and gaias. This is the intro to Rhesus Negative Blood Research, a comprehensive study guide by JRAnthony, 2021. Disclaimer: I am not a medical professional. However, this research is the result of many years of study. That said, I'm trying to keep these episodes short and as simple as possible. Episode 4 is about explaining inheritance and prevalence. To refresh your memory, in episode 2, explaining the Rh disease, I mentioned that the prevalence of the Rhd antigen is spreading, while those absent of the antigen, Rh-negs, are declining. While I will be discussing the decline of the Rhesus negative blood group in a later episode related to overall health concerns and status, in this episode I will be talking about actual demographics and population data studies. But first, let's discuss the very basics of Rh factor inheritance. I'll be reading from an article written by Stanford Blood Center. It reads, "Can two Rh positive parents have an Rh negative child?" Your Rh status, positive or negative, is determined by an antigen found on your red blood cells. Being Rh positive or Rh negative means that either you have the Rhesus D antigen on your red blood cells, positive, or you don't, negative. Let me say that again. Being Rh positive or Rh negative means that either you have the Rhesus D antigen on your red blood cells, which means you're positive, or you don't, and it means you're negative. Rh status is inherited from our parents, separately from our blood type. I think that's important to note because people do get that confused, and I've had a conversation with someone earlier about the blood type antigens versus the Rh factor antigen. They're not the same thing. So the Rh status is inherited from our parents separately from our blood type. If you inherit the dominant Rhesus D antigen, and we're going to talk about that word dominant here shortly. If you inherit the dominant Rhesus D antigen from one or both of your parents, then you are Rh positive, and this says 85% of us. If you do not inherit the Rhesus D antigen from either parent, then you are Rh negative, and it says 15% of us. So, is it possible for two people who are Rh positive to produce a child that's Rh negative? The answer is yes, but only if neither parent passes along Rhesus D. Again, is it possible for two people who are Rh positive to produce a child that's Rh negative? The answer is yes, but only if neither parent passes along that antigen. When studying Rh factor inheritance, you will find many research studies and news articles like the one above that describe the Rhd antigen as dominant versus recessive genes. However, it appears that there is no such thing as a recessive Rhd antigen or antigen D, as we are told from ScienceDirect.com when asked the question, is D antigen recessive? And just to clarify again, antigen D or D antigen is synonymous, meaning the same thing, with the Rhd antigen that causes people to be Rh positive. And it reads here with Science Direct, is D antigen recessive? The genes for these antigens located on the short arm of chromosome 1 are inherited in a set of 3 from each parent. The presence of D determines whether the individual is Rh positive, and the absence of D, well, there is no recessive allele, so D does not exist. It yields the Rh negative type. So again, I want to tell you that the presence of the D determines whether the individual is Rh positive. The absence of that D, well, it doesn't exist. That means you're Rh negative. That's because it is an antigen, a pathogen. It's not like blood types, and it's not inherited in the same way. So basically what the article is saying is that there's no such thing as dominant versus rhesus antigen when it comes to the Rh factor. You either have the antigen and you test positive, or you don't and it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as recessive. It's not inherited that way. Just like I've mentioned in another video, about testing positive for COVID. They're testing for an antigen, the spike protein on the surface of your red blood cells when they're testing for COVID. And you either test positive or you test negative. There's no such thing as dominant or recessive because it's a virus or a pathogen of some sort. That's for another time. Note, all sources used in this episode will be in the description with links provided. Moving on to Rh factor prevalence. You will most commonly hear people say that Rh positives make up 85% of the world's population and Rh negatives make up 15% of the world's population, as we learned from the Stanford Blood Center article when discussing inheritance. However, there is conflicting data on this, so I usually just say 85% to 94% and declining. In my personal opinion, and another reason why we need actual Rh-neg verified communities, Rh positives are closer to 94% and the Rh negative around 6% worldwide and declining. The reason I am adamant about saying that we are declining in population is because actual studies show that, and again, I will be discussing other reasons for the decline in population in a later episode. But in the meantime, let's get to the population data and demographics. For the population data here, it says, according to a comprehensive study, the worldwide frequency of Rh positive and Rh negative blood types is approximately 94% and 6% respectively. Now again, you're not going to read this on anything else. Everybody is still saying 85%, 85-15, 85-15. But this is saying that it's 94-6, and it's the only thing that actually gives you a chart that breaks it down demographically. And the reason why people are saying 85-15 is because you'll see in this chart, in the United States, the Rh negative is 15%, and the Rh positives are 85%. That's within the United States, not worldwide. This is saying population data worldwide for Rh negatives versus Rh positives is 94% Rh positives and 6% Rh negatives worldwide. The same study concluded that the share of the population with Rh negative blood type is set to fall further in the future, primarily due to low population growth in Europe, which is another reason why I mentioned I would get to this topic again in another episode. Titled, let me see here, titled Overall Health Concerns and Status. Yeah, that's what it was. The frequency of Rh factor blood types and the Rhd neg allele gene differs in various populations. And again, take a look at that chart and you'll see down at the very bottom of it, it says United States 15% neg and 85% positive. That's where everybody's getting those statistics from. And they're using them to pose them as worldwide statistics, which is deceiving because then we don't really know how many of us are actually in the world. We don't really know, which is another reason why we all need to just, I know it's hard to trust people, but we've got to figure it out. We've got to find out who is actually Rhesus negative and who isn't.